A 32-year-old man, 1% body fat, documented, measured, verified by physicians who examined him and later said they had never seen a human body conditioned to that degree. This was a man who could perform push-ups on a single finger, who could snatch a 125-pound barbell from the floor to above his head in a single motion, whose resting heart rate and muscle density were studied like a scientific phenomenon, because to the doctors who examined him, that is exactly what he was. On July the 20th, 1973, this man lay down for a nap after complaining of a headache. The official verdict was cerebral edema, swelling of the brain. But here is what the official verdict has never explained in 50 years of scrutiny. What caused it? Multiple autopsies, competing medical opinions, inquest documents sealed from public view for decades, and a case that legitimate medical researchers are still publishing papers on half a century later. The world knows how Bruce Lee lived. Very few know what really ended his life. Welcome to Beyond the Forgotten. To understand July 20th, you have to begin on May 10th. On that date, Bruce Lee was on the set of Enter the Dragon, working through a dubbing session, the kind of technical, unglamorous studio work that filled the gaps between the action sequences that would make him immortal. And then, without warning, he collapsed. What followed was not a minor episode. He suffered seizures, severe, sustained headaches, temporary loss of vision. He was rushed to hospital, and what the doctors found when they examined him stopped them cold. Cerebral edema, brain swelling, already present, in May, 2 months before the death that would shock the world. This is one of the most critically underreported facts in the entire case. When people discuss Bruce Lee's death, they discuss July. The May collapse is treated as a footnote, a near miss, a warning sign that was ultimately heeded. But the medical significance of what was found in May has never been fully resolved. Because the question it raises is the same question July raises, and it has never been satisfactorily answered by anyone. What caused it? He was flown to UCLA Medical Center. The physicians there were reportedly alarmed by the severity of what they were examining. A man of extraordinary physical condition presenting with brain swelling of unknown origin. He was treated, he stabilized, and then, against medical advice by most accounts, he returned to Hong Kong. In the weeks between May and July, people around Bruce Lee documented what they observed. Headaches that he described as severe, occasional dizziness, episodes that those close to him later described as confusion. Though the accounts vary in their specificity, he was managing symptoms, he was medicated, and the documented interactions between the medications he was prescribed during this period form one thread of a forensic picture that would only begin to come into focus decades later. He was also, by every account, pushing forward. He was building an empire. He had films in production, negotiations underway, a global profile that was accelerating beyond anything the entertainment world had seen from a martial artist. He was not the kind of man who stopped Bruce Lee died twice. The first time, they brought him back. The second time, nobody fully understood what they were fighting. The afternoon of July 20th began as a working meeting. Bruce Lee arrived at the apartment of actress Betty Ting Pei. The stated purpose was a script discussion. They were scheduled to meet with producer Raymond Chow to review material for a film called Game of Death. At some point during the afternoon, Lee complained of a headache. Betty Ting Pei gave him a tablet of Equagesic. Equagesic was a painkiller in common use at the time. It combined aspirin with a drug called meprobamate, a muscle relaxant and mild tranquilizer. It was a legal, prescribed medication. The kind of thing someone hands you for a headache without thinking twice. Bruce Lee lay down to rest in the bedroom. He never woke up. The timeline of what happened next is where the documented record begins to fracture. When the alarm was raised, when calls were made, precisely how long passed before medical help arrived. These details have been contested in the years since. What is documented is that by the time an ambulance reached Queen Elizabeth Hospital, Bruce Lee could not be revived. He was pronounced dead that night. Raymond Chow was present at some point during the evening. His own accounts of his movements and what he witnessed have been described by investigators and journalists as inconsistent in their details across different tellings. He was not alone in that. Betty Ting Pei's account of that afternoon and evening is perhaps the most examined in the case, because she was the last person documented to have seen Bruce Lee conscious. What she said publicly in 1973 and what she said in later interviews across the following decades contains differences. Not dramatic contradictions that blow the case open, but documented variations in detail and emphasis that investigators and researchers have noted and that were never formally reconciled in any official proceeding. The inquest that followed received testimony. That testimony was documented, and some of it remained sealed from public access for decades after the fact. The official story of that night has never been told the same way twice by the same people. The Hong Kong autopsy confirmed cerebral edema. The brain, which in a healthy adult of Bruce Lee's size would weigh approximately 1,400 grams, had swollen to approximately 1,575 grams. That is substantial swelling, measurable, documented, significant. What triggered it was listed as undetermined. The investigation then did something that has influenced how this case has been discussed ever since. It pivoted toward two substances found in or associated with Bruce Lee at the time of death. Cannabis traces were detected in his stomach contents, and the equagesic tablet given to him hours before his death became a central focus. The attempt to link cannabis to the death was prominent in early reporting. Medical experts, then and since, have largely dismissed cannabis alone as a credible cause of the cerebral edema that killed him. The science does not support it as a mechanism for swelling of this severity. But the framing stuck in public memory in ways that the more medically serious investigations that came later never quite managed to dislodge. The equagesic line of inquiry was more substantive. Meprobamate, the muscle relaxant component, can trigger hypersensitivity reactions in certain individuals. Research into this pathway has been ongoing, but it too has struggled to fully explain the specific mechanism and severity of what the autopsy documented. Then, in 2018, a team of Spanish researchers published a paper in the Clinical Kidney Journal that reframed the entire medical conversation. Their proposal: Bruce Lee may have died from hyponatremia. Hyponatremia is, in plain terms, dangerously low sodium levels in the blood, caused not by dehydration but by the opposite, by the body taking in more water than the kidneys can process and excrete. When sodium levels drop severely, fluid shifts into cells throughout the body, including the brain. The brain swells. And in a closed space like the skull, that swelling has nowhere to go. Here is why the Spanish researchers considered Bruce Lee specifically vulnerable. His water consumption was, by multiple accounts, extraordinary. He was documented as consuming large quantities of water daily, but Bruce Lee was also functioning with reduced kidney capacity. Earlier in his life, he had a kidney removed, and the connection between reduced kidney function and the kidney's diminished ability to excrete excess water is well established in medical literature. A person with one kidney processing the fluid volume that Bruce Lee's documented habits involved was operating with a narrower physiological margin than most people would recognize. Add equagesic to this picture. Meprobamate has documented associations with the release of antidiuretic hormone, the hormone that tells the kidneys to retain water rather than expel it. If you are already consuming more fluid than your kidneys can optimally process, and you take a substance that further reduces their ability to expel it, the sodium-to-water balance in your blood can shift into dangerous territory with a speed that produces no warning symptoms obvious enough to act on. You develop a headache. You lie down. Your brain is swelling. The 2018 hyponatremia theory does not claim to be the definitive answer. The researchers themselves presented it as the most medically coherent explanation consistent with the documented evidence. The existing kidney impairment, the fluid consumption, the equagesic, the cerebral edema of the documented severity, and the earlier May collapse, which may represent a prior hyponatremic episode that was caught and corrected before it became fatal. Other legitimate theories remain on the table. Heat stroke. Hong Kong in July is severe, and Lee was working in conditions that could have compounded any physiological vulnerability. Genetic hypersensitivity to the meprobamate compound. A drug interaction pattern that the medical knowledge of 1973 was not equipped to identify, and that took decades to articulate properly. Some of the witnesses who testified at the 1973 inquest are dead. Their full accounts, what they said under oath in a formal legal proceeding, in the weeks immediately following Bruce Lee's death have not been made comprehensively public. The most disturbing thing about Bruce Lee's death is not the theories. It is that after 50 years, the official record still cannot tell you with certainty what killed the healthiest man in the room. Bruce Lee spent his life studying the body, his own and the principles that governed every human body. He wrote philosophy about physical perfection as a path to something larger. He trained in a way that nobody around him fully understood, because what he was reaching for was beyond what the people around him had a framework to conceptualize. The brutal irony of his death is that it came from somewhere invisible, not a fight, not an accident, not something that could be blocked or countered or trained against. Something internal, something that may have been building for months without anyone, including the doctors who examined him in May, being able to identify it clearly enough to stop it. Some deaths change the world. Some deaths remain unexplained. Bruce Lee's managed to do both. Beyond the forgotten. Because the truth doesn't bury itself, and neither does the mystery.